Very good evening to everybody who is joining us over Zoom and on Facebook Live. And especially, I want to say a big hello to all the residents in Chua Kang GRC, and especially those who we've just talked to earlier in the day and invited us to join the night session. I hope you all have made it to join in and join our session tonight. And I thank you for coming and hearing what we have to say. And from my previous colleagues, what they have spoken, I think you get a sense of where we come from, and hopefully, this informal style where we really speak off the cuff and from the heart, you really get a stronger sense of, who we are as people and who we will be, as your elected representatives in Parliament, if you give us and when you give us the chance to work for you. In the video earlier, there was one thing that I talked about, which is political apathy among young people, and why I believe it is something that we should change. And this is something naturally that many people have asked me as I've gone door to door visiting residents and reporters as well. What is the reason for this political apathy? And today I'd like to touch a little bit on that. What is the cause of it? And for many of you, I think you will know that it is actually something ingrained in us since we were young. It is something brought out in our education system, that we are not told to speak on things that are political. And as a result, there is this sense that, hopelessness or learned helplessness, if you will, regarding political matters. And the reality is that young people are deeply concerned about social issues. Many of them will tell you about their concerns about, managing race relations in Singapore, about, taking care of the disenfranchised and underprivileged, like our migrant workers, especially with COVID and the foreign worker clusters, the treatment over in the dormitories and living conditions. So it is very clear that, young people do see the need for more activism, if you will, on the social front to solve these issues that Singapore faces. But unfortunately, there is this disconnect that we see. And this disconnect is that young Singaporeans don't feel that the solution to these social issues is by casting their vote on the ballot box to effect a change. Somehow there is that sense that, there is civil society going on, and many of my friends volunteer with NGOs to work with these groups to ensure that there is more help given to these disenfranchised communities. But at the same time, there is that resistance to make that link with politics and say, is there a need for more alternative voices like PSP to come in to champion these causes, which currently the government is not looking after? And if you think about it, that is precisely the issue at hand, because when we talk about NGOs and civil society in general, it is a space where our government is not in, and as a result, we need these organizations to come in to fill the gap, to take care of, for example, migrant workers, TWC2 and Home and Haga and so on. These are things that our current government is not taking care of, and NGOs come in to fill this gap. But we see it is not enough, because currently NGOs do not provide that framework to be able to push for policies. And the top-down approach that we currently have amongst our leaders means that many of the suggestions by NGOs are not being taken up. So this is why we need more political representatives in Parliament to actually stand for you and address these issues that young people and older generations are also concerned about, the deep inequalities that Dr. Tan has just spoken about earlier. So when it comes back to this idea of young people, I think there is very recent evidence, as many of you will have seen, that there is in fact a systemic issue at play. If you know, just 2 days ago, it was reported that Hwa Chong school issued an advisory to its students telling them not to participate or talk about politics on social media. And these are to the Hwa Chong JC students who are 17 and 18 years old. And in fact, they doubled down when asked by reporters, and they said, and I quote, "We certainly do not want our students to be apathetic about national issues, but because of their youth, we do not want them to be inadvertently embroiled in agendas beyond their control. And so I think it is very concerning to me when I hear that, because here we have an education school to tell students that what they are doing is not right, that now commenting on social media even is something that they should not be doing. And we know young people today, social media is ubiquitous and is how we connect with the world and how we connect to our friends and how we receive the news that is coming in, So for them, for Hwa Chong to double down and say that schools, or it tells students that they should not be participating or commenting about the general election specifically, is something that I think is troubling. And we see clearly that there has been stifling of political voices, and this is the result of many years of deliberate policies, and as a result, political apathy certainly grows amongst young people. And this is why we need to step up without fear. Give us a chance to tell them that alternative voices is something that is necessary, and only when we are in there, then people will see that political outcomes do affect people's lives. So we do need change quickly in this area, and we hope to be that change in Choa Chu Kang. Now I'd like to talk also about one specific issue that I've met many residents are concerned about, and it is in fact, I would say, emblematic of a larger macro level issue of our government, and that is the concerns about the new dormitory being built at Choa Chu Kang Grove. So this new dormitory, you are sure to know about, is something that will house 25,000 dormitory workers. And it is something that many residents have expressed concern about. And of course, in Singapore, we understand, Singaporeans, we understand, we don't have this, not in my backyard approach. Many of the Choa Chu Kang residents I spoke to know that there is a need to house these foreign workers somewhere in Singapore. But the issue is this: has there been enough consultation with the people, the residents of Choa Chu Kang on this matter? Many of the residents I spoke to felt that they had wished that, before this dormitory was being built, that they could have some input and actually talk about, what are some of their concerns if this dormitory was being built near their place. And I see many valid concerns. They talked about, potentially overstretching the current infrastructure, specifically the buses, and whether it will be overcrowding, especially during the weekends in these areas. Do we have enough capacity to accommodate 25,000 dormitory workers, foreign workers, in Choa Chu Kang Grove, given the existing, infrastructure, transport in the Choa Chu Kang area? So I cite this example, and only this example, because many of the other examples have already been cited by my colleagues. But this example to me is just something that, impresses upon many residents, and it is symptomatic of the larger issue at play, which has already been touched upon by my colleagues, which is whether the government, our current leaders, have the residents' hearts or residents' concerns at their hearts, and whether they involve them in decision making. Currently with this top-down approach, they will just prescribe what they think is best, the policies in place, and the bluntness of these policy tools is something we hope to be able to refine when we are given the chance in Parliament, so that we can ask these hard questions to say, are these being addressed? Your concerns, is it something that we can have a bit more participation on, a bit more of a discussion, so that citizens and residents of Choa Chu Kang are brought into the fold when the policy on a national level with regards to dormitory and housing these foreign workers actually are brought home to them, because they are being housed in Choa Chu Kang Grove. So to me, that is ultimately the crux of the issue. How can we build a better government and have leaders who are willing to hear and listen and take the residents' feedback into consideration before planning a policy and before, rolling out measures that may not ultimately resolve the issue in an adequate way. And only when we hear everyone's concerns, then I think our leaders are equipped to make a good decision. So I thank everyone tonight, and I think that would be the end of what I have to say. I look forward to your questions later. Thank you very much. Back to you, Craig.